Hello, fellow Daz Studio enthusiasts. This is Not From This World, and I want to welcome you to my tutorial series where we explore Daz Studio. Today, I want to talk about an add-on that we can purchase through the Daz store, and this is called Mesh Grabber. If I go to Daz Studio, we can search the store and just type in Mesh Grabber. And when we search for Mesh Grabber, we're going to see several products come up. Now, I'm not really promoting any content on Daz Studio. However, I think this is a really cool add-on. And so what an add-on will do is it will give you a new tool in your Daz Studio that you can use. And what Mesh Grabber does is it literally grabs your mesh, your geometry, and it's able to move it and morph it. Now, currently, as of June 2023, there are 3 add-ons to Mesh Grabber that you can purchase. There is the basic Mesh Grabber that came out, I believe, in 2019. Then we have a Mesh Grabber Rotation add-on. And then we have a Mesh Grabber Morph Editor, where we can actually change morphs that we've created using the deformer. So this is a pretty cool add-on, and I want to give you a little quick rundown tutorial of how we can use this Mesh Grabber. Now, Mesh Grabber is made by a vendor on Daz Studio called Man Friday, and he has a couple of pretty cool add-ons. This is one of them, and so I have all 3 of them purchased and downloaded onto my computer. So I'm going to go to Daz and kind of show you how this works. So I've got my assistant here, Milika, ready to go to help us out. And we're going to create a nice render of her with some changes that we make due to Mesh Grabber. Now, Mesh Grabber can be found in our toolbar. So once you purchase it, you upload it into Daz Studio. Just click on your tools and you'll find it right here. It is a new tool that you'll have, so you can select it. And when you select it, you'll need to go to your tool settings, and you'll get a nice menu of things that we can manipulate in Mesh Grabber. If you don't have this tool settings tab, remember you just find it under Windows, Panes, and then you can scroll down to where it says tool settings right here. So that's just kind of how you can find it. So I'm going to get my tool settings open, and we've got quite a few things that we can actually do with Mesh Grabber. Now, before we use Mesh Grabber on Milika, we're going to do what I normally avoid because I think it's boring and I hate it when tutorials have it, but I have a second instance open, and we're going to create a primitive just to play with this a little bit, and then we're going to move what I show you on a primitive over to Milika, and we're going to change our render into something more creative, a little bit better. So I'm going to come in, I'm going to create a plane, and my plane, I'm going to keep it kind of simple for this demo. I'm going to give it 50 divisions with a size of 1 meter. And that's just so we can see it better. I'm going to kind of raise it up. And I'm going to go to surfaces, and we're going to give it a color because it's kind of hard to see gray. So I'm going to make it a nice blue. And I'm going to get out of Mesh Grabber here for a second, just so you can see that we have some basic geometry here, right? So we've got our plane with the vertices that show us our geometry. So I'm going to select Mesh Grabber, and we're going to open it up in our tool settings. First of all, we're going to look at each one of these things. I do want to go through them in this tutorial just to show you what Mesh Grabber can do. So the first thing is, it says selection type. We have 3 selection types. We have face, edge, and vertex. When you open up the Mesh Grabber, it's going to default to face. And so when we select our prop, what we're going to get is we're going to get the Mesh Grabber grabbing an entire node. So we're going to grab, you can see I'm selecting each box here. So that's under face. If I select edge, I can select just the edges of our geometry. So see how I am not selecting each box, I'm selecting the edges of boxes. And then if I select vertex, then I'm selecting where the geometry nodes intersect. All right. Now, depending on what we use, we can get different results. To start off with, we're just going to keep it at face, and we're going to look down here at the gizmo. So our gizmo is this thing that you're looking at here that looks like a globe. So we have this sphere, and then if you look, you see we've got this gizmo that has our X, Y, and Z vertices. And then because I've purchased all 3 products of Mesh Grabber, I have these rotators. So I have an X, Y, and Z rotation choice. And then if I zoom in, you'll see that we have a box that we can grab that has these little triangles. So we can grab this box. What we're going to do is we use the gizmo to morph and change the geometry. If you look here, the gizmo has a size, and so we can change the size of the gizmo. So if it's kind of in the way, we can shrink it down to 1, and you can see my arrows and rotation planes are smaller. But if we can't see them, we can zoom it up all the way to 10, and you can see they're much bigger. So what we're going to do is we're going to use this gizmo to change our geometry. It is defaulted to world, but you can play around. You can select node, you can select normal, clamped, 45 degrees. You can see how it's changing the direction that our vertices are pointing. I'm going to keep it at world just to keep things safe and easy. So that means, if we go to parameters, we have our X translate, Y translate, and Z translate. They're oriented along our XYZ coordinate system. So for example, if I selected 45, it would rotate those 45 degrees. So let's just keep them at the world selection here, just to keep things simple. And what we can do is we'll select the object that we want to morph. So it's the plane. And then I'm going to just select some of the geometry that we want to manipulate. And if I use my gizmo, I'm going to grab this Y translate, click on it, and I'm going to pull it up. You can see that I am changing the geometry. Now, one of the things that we'll see here below the gizmo orientation is going to be where it says gain and falloff radius. I believe gain is going to be defaulted at 100. Now, what gain does is it's going to manipulate how much geometry we can actually move. So, for example, if I move gain from 100 and let's just move it up here. You can see I'm moving a certain amount of geometry up, kind of grabbing a bunch of geometry and pulling it up. If I change the gain, it's going to change how much I can raise that up, how much of the geometry I can manipulate. So see, the lower the gain goes, the less this is going to raise up. Now below that, we have what's called the falloff radius. And the falloff radius, I believe, is defaulted at 5. And so the falloff radius is how much geometry is going to be affected. See, like I just made this line that has the geometry selected, but the falloff radius is going to tell me how much we manipulate each one of those geometry squares around what I have selected. So you can see at 5, I'm making just little hills, but if I raise this, the higher the fall-off number, the more geometry is affected. So I'm going from like little pointy hills to more broad plateaus in my plane. So the closer I go to 0, the more I'm affecting just the geometry I selected. Now below the fall-off radius are the fall-off types, and you can see how this is going to affect our geometry. So right now I have it selected at smooth. So as I raise or lower my morph, we're going to kind of have it rounded off in a smooth pattern. I can change this to sphere, which kind of makes it more spherical. See here, smooth to sphere. One of the big changes is the sharp. So when I select sharp, it's going to make the top of the geometry that I have selected more sharp, and then it's going to taper off more. And then random, we get like this random pattern. It looks, like a mountain range. So we can manipulate this and play with it as much as we want. This is a really cool thing. Now, another awesome feature is if you purchase all 3 of the mesh grabbers, you're going to get these rotation planes. And so what I can do is I can select my geometry and then I can rotate it. So I can take that geometry and I can rotate it up. Now, to give you a good example, let's select smooth. Let's make sure we're on face and world. And see, I can take this geometry. This is the red one, so this is going to be our X translate rotation. And see, I can rotate as much as I want, 90 degrees or more. So see, I can really change it. If I select my Z translate, I can rotate it the other direction. I can combine them. So I have rotation in both directions. So the rotation is pretty cool. One other thing I want to show you is, remember, our arrows are going to be our translators. So X, Y, and Z translate. I can move them individually. But if I select this little box in the middle of the gizmo, I can use the XYZ translator all together. So I can just grab it with this box and I can create morphs using all three together. That looks like a crater on Mars or something. And so you kind of get the idea with this. Now, what we're going to do is we are going to use this in a real world situation. So I'm going to go back to my Milica. What I want to do with Mesh Grabber is something I can't really do with D-Force, and I can't really do it with our deformer, which is to take her top, and we're going to take the top and we're just going to pull it down over her shoulder. All right, now I can use Mesh Grabber to do this. So to give you an example of what Mesh Grabber can do, this is one of the pictures I created for a different tutorial, and you can see that as my Milica character is sitting here looking at her computer, this strap on her nightie is down off of her shoulder. This originally was up here like it should be, and I used Mesh Grabber to pull it down so that it is kind of hanging off of her shoulder. So that is exactly what we're going to do with Milica on our pose here, and I'll show you how. So what I'm going to do is we're going to pull this top off of her shoulder so that it's just kind of hanging here. So in order to use Mesh Grabber, I am going to have to select my Milica character, and I'm going to have to find her clothing, which is this D-Force Romance nightie. I'm going to select it, and now I can go in and I can select the geometry of the nightie. So I'm going to do that and see, I get my gizmo, and I can just come in here and I can select parts of this clothing's geometry. Now, once I select it, I just hit the mouse button, select what I want, and now I can start pulling this into the position I want it. And so this is a little bit wonky. See how it's really changing weird as I pull it? You're just going to have to kind of realize that Mesh Grabber, as I move things, might look a little wonky. I can also try and use this rotator. See how I can rotate. All right. I can click off. I can select some new geometry. So it looks like I need to move this a little bit. I'm going to pull that. And we're just going to slowly pull this off of her shoulder. It's important to select all of the geometry you want to move. So, you know, it'll really only move the geometry that you select. So you've got to select everything you want to move. All right, so you can see we're kind of getting there. If I want to look at what it's going to be, I just click lower down on the same prop. So the clothing, I'm just clicking lower down so I can get a look at what it's appearing to be. one thing that Mesh Grabber may do is it may distort your prop. And you can see I'm getting a little bit of distortion with the lace and stuff. And so, you know, it's just something you've got to work with as you do this. One of the ways you can get rid of the distortion could be to just turn it so that it's hidden, you know, just kind of transects through your character so you don't see it. I can also select, you know, a smaller area and rotate that. Okay, I'm pretty happy with moving our shoulder strap down below Milika's shoulder. The one thing I notice if I zoom in, I have a little bit of geometry that I don't like. This is a kind of an artifact here. So I can fix this. Just make sure that the D-Force 90 is selected. And when it's selected, I'm not going to use Mesh Grabber, but I can come up here to Tools, go to my Geometry Editor, and then I'm going to just select this one piece of geometry, right-click it, go to Geometry Editing, and then say Delete Selected Polygon. I'm going to delete that, and I don't have that artifact anymore. So now I am really happy with how this looks. So I'm going to get Milika kind of posed here, and let's do a render. All right, so here is my render where I used a little bit of Mesh Grabber to enhance the picture by taking that strap and dropping it down off of her shoulder. So Milika is looking as cute as ever. You know, I'm pretty happy with this. So if you like my video, please like, subscribe, and give me a comment or two. I'd love to hear what you have to say about Daz Studio. And so until next time, I hope you have a wonderful day.